Tonight, we have a chilling tale. Sit tight until the end. Let's begin. Mia Layton had always found comfort in the quiet solitude of small towns. After a painful breakup, she sought a fresh start in Willow Grove, a place steeped in history and mystery. She purchased an old house on the outskirts, a fixer-upper with more than a few eerie quirks. The locals warned her the place had a tragic past, but she brushed it off, seeing it as just another way they entertained themselves. The house itself was quaint yet unsettling, shrouded by looming trees and perpetually darkened by shadows even during daylight. Mia spent her first few days cleaning, unpacking, and arranging furniture, trying to make the old place feel like home. One chilly autumn evening, she was in the attic, rummaging through dust-covered boxes, when she stumbled upon a hidden compartment under a loose floorboard. In it, buried beneath layers of dust, lay an old journal. The journal was cracked and worn, its cover stained with age. As she flipped through its yellowed pages, she was struck by the cramped, shaky handwriting that filled every inch of the paper. The first few entries were vague but unnerving. Mentions of sleepless nights, strange sounds in the house, and a growing sense of paranoia. The author's name was scrawled on the first page in faded ink: Helen. Intrigued by the story left behind, Mia took the journal to her room and began to read it more closely. As she delved into the entries, Helen's despair came to life. She had moved into the house years ago with her daughter, Clara, but after a tragic accident claimed Clara's life, Helen's grief turned into an obsession. Desperate to reconnect with her daughter, Helen had dabbled in dark rituals, trying to make contact with Clara's spirit. But things had gone horribly wrong. The journal hinted at a haunting. Whispers in the night, shadows that moved without explanation, and an overwhelming feeling of being watched. When Mia finally set the journal aside, a shiver ran down her spine. She told herself it was just the unsettling story playing tricks on her mind, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her. That night, as Mia lay in bed, a soft tapping sound echoed through the house. She held her breath, listening intently, but dismissed it as the old pipes or creaky floorboards. Yet, as the tapping grew louder, she could feel her heart pounding. When she finally dared to check, the sound stopped abruptly, leaving an eerie silence in its place. The next morning, Mia was startled to find the journal on her bedside table. She was certain she'd left it in the attic, and a chill settled over her as she opened it. A new entry had appeared, written in Helen's shaky hand, detailing Mia's previous day, including things she hadn't shared with anyone. The journal somehow knew every little detail, even her innermost thoughts. She tried to dismiss it as a coincidence, but the unease lingered. For the next few days, Mia continued her attempts to settle into her new life, but the journal became an unavoidable presence. It appeared on her bedside table each morning, and each time a new entry awaited her. The entries grew increasingly personal, recounting not just her actions but her fears and anxieties. Then one night, Mia found 3 ominous rules written in the margins of a page. Rule number 1: never leave the journal open overnight. Rule number 2: never let anyone else touch it. Rule number 3: if you try to destroy it, be prepared to face your deepest fear. Mia shivered, dismissing them as part of Helen's disturbed mind, but a gnawing doubt crept into her thoughts. These rules seemed designed to keep her bound to the journal. Her instincts told her to get rid of it, but the warnings stopped her in her tracks. She placed the journal in the attic, intending to keep her distance. However, the strange occurrences in the house escalated. The footsteps and tapping sounds continued, sometimes even closer to her bedroom door. One night, Mia heard a child's laughter echo through the empty rooms. She froze, gripping the edge of her bed, too terrified to investigate. She told herself it was her mind playing tricks, but the sounds persisted, wearing down her nerves until she felt she couldn't stand it anymore. The following morning, Mia found the journal once again on her bedside table, with a new entry that left her feeling trapped. The entry didn't just record her day, it predicted her future. Small, innocuous details played out exactly as the journal had described, leaving her feeling as if her every move was predetermined. Days later, the journal grew darker, recounting an ominous prediction about her younger sister, Lily. The entry described a fatal accident, detailing the panic and devastation Mia would feel. Desperate, Mia called her sister, urging her to stay home, but Lily brushed off her concerns, laughing it off as her sister's imagination. That night, Mia received a call from the hospital. Lily had been in an accident and hadn't survived. The news hit her like a physical blow. Grief and guilt weighed heavily on her, but her sorrow quickly turned to rage. She stormed out to the backyard, journal in hand, determined to rid herself of its curse once and for all. Dousing it with gasoline, she struck a match and watched as flames consumed the journal, feeling a twisted satisfaction as it burned to ash. But when Mia woke the next morning, the journal was back on her bedside table, perfectly intact, as if untouched by flames. She screamed in frustration, her mind reeling at the impossibility of it. Another new entry had appeared, detailing her attempt to destroy it, mocking her futile efforts. Desperate to understand the journal's power, Mia began researching the house's history. In the local library, she found newspaper clippings and old records detailing Helen and her daughter's tragic story. After Clara's death, Helen had isolated herself in the house, using dark rituals and forbidden practices to reach her daughter's spirit. Witnesses claimed to have seen shadows moving behind the attic window, heard eerie laughter, and felt an overwhelming sadness emanating from the house. Helen had become obsessed with the journal, recording her attempts to make contact, and ultimately, her spirit had become trapped within its pages, cursed to haunt anyone who discovered it. The rules, Mia realized, weren't just strange warnings. They were binding restraints designed to keep Helen's spirit contained. But breaking any of them would unleash the full fury of the curse. Haunted by the journal and desperate to escape its grip, Mia made one last attempt. She returned to the attic, where she laid out a salt circle on the floor, a protection ritual she had read about in her research. Placing the journal in the center, she began to speak, calling out Helen's name, begging her to release the house and anyone who stumbled upon the journal. As she chanted, the attic grew frigid, and shadows began to gather in the corners. A dark, heavy presence filled the room, pressing down on her like a suffocating weight. The journal trembled, its pages fluttering as though an invisible hand was rifling through them. Cold, bony fingers seemed to brush against Mia's shoulder, and she felt the weight of Helen's sorrow and fury. Mia continued to plead, her voice breaking as she spoke of Helen's loss, her desperation, and the tragedy that had bound her spirit to the journal. She acknowledged Helen's grief, her unbreakable love for Clara, and the pain that had twisted her spirit into something vengeful. The air in the attic grew still, and Mia sensed a shift in the atmosphere. The shadows seemed to recoil, and the cold faded. For a moment, a faint, mournful whisper drifted through the room, a voice filled with sorrow, regret, and gratitude. Then, the journal crumbled into ash within the salt circle, releasing a faint, almost peaceful sigh as it disintegrated. Mia felt an overwhelming sense of relief, as though a heavy weight had lifted from her chest. For the first time in weeks, the house was silent. The tapping sound stopped, and the shadowy figures vanished. Mia felt as though she had finally freed Helen's spirit, releasing her from the curse that had bound her to the journal for so long. She left Willow Grove the following day, leaving the house and its dark history behind. Years passed, and the house remained empty, its dark past forgotten by all but the locals who dared to remember. Sometimes, on stormy nights, people claimed to hear faint whispers in the wind or see shadows flickering in the attic window. But Mia never looked back. She moved forward, grateful to have survived, her life no longer controlled by the haunted journal. And that, my friends, is the end of tonight's story. Sleep well if you can. But remember, some secrets are better left undisturbed.